On a chilly rainy night in the financial district of Manhattan, a 13-year-old girl, clutching her rain-soaked sheet music to her chest, shivered with cold as she gazed up at the towering skyscrapers. "Please, listen." Her voice cut through the footsteps of hurrying businessmen. "Just 3 minutes of my performance." A man in a fine suit stopped, moved by her desperate plea. He was one of the most influential producers in the music industry, usually surrounded by a retinue, but now all bore expressions of surprise. The girl's chestnut hair was wet, and her school uniform clung to her body. Yet her amber eyes sparkled with a fierce determination. Trembling, she held up a damp old photo. "Do you remember the woman in this photo?" It showed a younger man with a beautiful woman at a grand piano. Her delicate fingers and graceful demeanor mirrored in the girl. "Listen to my playing, and you'll understand who I am." The man stood frozen momentarily, seeing the likeness of the woman in the photo in the girl before him. Quickly regaining his composure, he gave his secretary some instructions and hurried into the building. "Wait." The girl's plea was lost in the wind as people around lost interest and walked away. But she stood firm, staring after the disappearing figure. "I will definitely make you listen," Amelia whispered with determination. "My performance." Manhattan's rain intensified, as if to quash her resolve. Yet, this stormy night would steer Amelia's life and the lives around her in unforeseen directions, marking the beginning of an unexpected miracle woven by a single piano piece. Amelia Grace, 13, once a shining talent in New York's music scene, is the daughter of the vanished pianist Elizabeth Winters. Having lost her mother at 5, she now lives with her gravely ill father, Thomas Grace, a former Broadway violinist, in a worn-down apartment in the suburbs. The morning sun gently lights the keys as Amelia plays Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Despite her age, her performance is imbued with profound emotion. Once a prominent musical family on Broadway, they were forced to move from a luxury apartment to an old one due to the father's illness, selling off the mother's treasured jewels one by one to cover medical expenses. Now, Amelia and her father live in a room of a building over 40 years old. The piano Amelia plays is the last luxury item left, a memento of her mother and a support for her passion for music. Yet now, even that might need to be sold to afford her father's new medical treatments. The peeling wallpaper highlighted by the morning sun underlines the room's age. Yet Amelia dutifully plays every day, honing the talent inherited from her mother. "Amelia." Thomas's voice from the next room interrupts her. "Sorry, did I wake you, Daddy?" Amelia rushed to the bedside of her father, Thomas, a former Broadway orchestra violinist now debilitated by an unexplained neurological illness that was progressively weakening him. Just when they thought he had fully recovered, the disease unexpectedly returned 6 months ago. "It's okay." Thomas smiled at his daughter. "Your playing is the best alarm clock." Contrary to his reassuring words, he began to cough violently. Amelia quickly handed him a glass of water. Seeing her father's trembling hands tightened a knot in her chest. There was a call from the teacher, Amelia said, holding her father's hand. "I can audition for Juilliard next month." A momentary joy lit up Thomas's tired face. "That's wonderful." But his expression clouded over in the next moment. "But..." Amelia cut him off. "Don't worry. I'll do everything I can to get a scholarship." Thomas sighed deeply. "Amelia, I'm sorry. As your father." Just then, the doorbell rang. Amelia opened the door to find a middle-aged man in a suit. It was Dr. Smith, her father's primary physician. After examining Thomas, Dr. Smith sat down with Amelia in the living room, the light from the window highlighting his weary expression. "Amelia, you're 13 now, so let's be clear." Dr. Smith began with a calm but firm voice. "Your father's condition is progressing faster than anticipated. If it continues..." Amelia held her breath. "What about the new treatment?" "Doctor, you mentioned a clinical trial last month. The trial in Europe was successful, and it's been approved by the authorities. But..." He paused, placing a document on the table. It listed a staggering amount of costs for the new insurance uncovered medication, travel expenses, and specialist consultation fees, all way beyond what Amelia's family could afford. 3 weeks. Dr. Smith said gravely. "Ideally, we would start treatment within this time frame." "Any longer?" Amelia remained silent, staring at the figures. Her father's savings had been nearly depleted by his ongoing medical expenses, and her mother's jewelry had already been sold. "I'll give you some time," Dr. Smith said as he stood up. "Think it over." After the doctor left, Amelia sat at the piano. Her fingers gently caressed the keys, like touching the surface of water. In that moment, the repetitive bass notes echoed like the beating of her own heart. Amelia's fingers stopped quietly on the keyboard. She stared out the window, her mind replaying a scene she had seen at Grand Central Station. A black grand piano set against the starry ceiling, bathed in soft light, with the footfalls of passing people creating a strange resonance. That time, people in suits stopped in their tracks, captivated by a pianist's Chopin performance. I watched as their expressions softened and melted with the music, and bills steadily stacked in the pianist's hat. I might be able to do it too. Amelia gazed at her slender fingers. This inherited talent from her mother could be the key to saving her father. Her resolve quietly but firmly took shape in the dusty air lit by the morning sun. Amelia stood and peeked into her father's room. Thomas was soundly asleep from exhaustion. "I promise, Daddy," she whispered softly. "I will definitely cure you." Leaving the room, Amelia remembered it was nearly time for her father's medication. As she searched the study drawer for the medicine, an old envelope caught her eye, marked "for when it's needed" in her mother's handwriting. Inside was a photo of her mother, young and seated at a grand piano on a concert hall stage, with an unfamiliar man standing beside her in an expensive suit and an air of dignity. Yet his gaze towards her mother was gentle. Who is this man? The answer lay within a diary, also in the envelope. Amelia gasped. 14 years ago, her mother Elizabeth had been discovered by an up-and-coming music producer, Michael Sterling. Speaking of Sterling, he is still known as a major music producer in the industry. Amelia has seen features on him several times on music programs. He is famous for his ability to spot genius talent, and for nurturing the artists he discovers into global stars. And Elizabeth was once such a talent discovered by him. The diary vividly detailed her meetings with Michael and the days filled with lessons. "Daddy, did you know Mommy was such an amazing pianist?" Thomas had always spoken fondly of meeting her mother. A chance encounter with a pianist who played along with his violin performance at a small jazz bar. I still remember that night vividly. A few months ago, when my father could still speak. Thomas had a nostalgic, gentle expression on his face. I was playing the violin at a small jazz bar, as usual. I was in the middle of performing Gershwin's Summertime. Then, someone started playing the piano. When I turned around, there was a very beautiful woman seated there. She joined in with my playing in perfect harmony, as if she had been my collaborator for many years. His eyes looked distant, his voice warm with nostalgia. That was your mother. That night was truly special. Every time Amelia heard her father recount meeting her mother, it warmed her heart. But now, the diary revealed a different side of her mother. Recognized by a famous producer, dreaming of glamorous stages, and close to making her stage debut. Yet why had she left such a promising career to play piano in a small jazz bar? As Amelia read on, a page stated, "I choose to live quietly, giving birth to this child." What does this mean? Was this child herself? Puzzled, Amelia read further, where her mother's emotions were meticulously recorded. Memories with Michael grow day by day. But he has a big dream, to nurture talented musicians and launch them globally. I cannot destroy that dream. A few pages later, the test results are in. It's certain now. I'm carrying Michael's child. But telling him would change his life. The music industry's rumors are cruel, and this truth would ruin his reputation. So, Amelia's hands trembled. Her mother's true confession was on the next page. She couldn't muster the strength to turn the page. I've decided not to tell Michael Sterling. I'll live a new life quietly, just me and this child. Months later, the diary's tone turned joyful. A miraculous encounter at a small jazz bar with a violinist, Thomas Grace. He accepted everything about me, my past, and the child in my womb. "This child will be ours," he said, embracing me. I couldn't stop crying. The last page detailed the origin of Amelia's name, chosen for its meaning of beloved by her deeply loving parents. Outside the window, the evening sky was turning a deep purple. Memories of her life swirled inside Amelia, filled with moments with her father Thomas, and glimpses of the music industry mogul Michael Sterling on TV and magazines. My real father is. Amelia slowly closed the diary. The small inconsistencies she had felt throughout her life now made sense. Thomas's black hair and brown eyes, her own golden brown hair and gray eyes, often told she resembled her mother more. But this revelation did not change her love for Thomas. Instead, it deepened her appreciation for his kindness, raising her as his own for 13 years, and even now, smiling gently at her from his sickbed. Looking out the window, she saw the sunset behind the skyscrapers. The sky painted orange, gradually swallowed by purple darkness. This scene mirrored her current emotional state. There is a new treatment, but it's a special medication not covered by insurance. Suddenly, the doctor's words echoed in her mind. The enormous cost of the treatment. And now, her mother's past suddenly revealed. Amelia sat back at the piano, quietly opening the keyboard. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto, said to be her mother's favorite, which she had practiced since childhood, might have been her inherited talent. She gazed at the photo again. 14 years ago, her mother chose to give up her musical career to start a new life in this city. At 13, Amelia couldn't fully understand why her mother made that choice. But now, she might have a chance to save her father. Michael Sterling, the major music producer, known for supporting talented musicians, as written in her mother's diary. Maybe, just maybe, if he heard her play, he might help her. The possibility was slim, but for her father's sake, any small chance was worth taking. Her performance, bearing her mother's blood, would surely reach his heart. Amelia stood up with determination. Starting tomorrow, she would play at Grand Central Station, earning money to save her father, and hoping someone might notice her. And someday, she carefully tucked the photo of her mother into her sheet music folder. Outside, the street lights began to glow, and the New York night quietly deepened. A mix of anxiety and hope intertwined in her heart. This decision would change her life and the fates of many, unbeknownst to anyone yet. The next morning, before New York awoke, Amelia arrived by early train at Grand Central Station. The morning sun cast light patterns on the marble floor as she approached the main concourse. "Excuse me," Amelia asked a station attendant. "May I play the piano?" The attendant looked troubled but checked the rules and reluctantly agreed. "Only until the morning rush. And make sure the permit is visible." Amelia nodded and sat at the grand piano donated by Steinway, played by different musicians each morning. She took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne No. 20 resonated through the station. In the morning quiet, the soft melody gently filled the space, turning heads of a few early commuters. Amelia played with her eyes closed, fully feeling the music that her mother loved. Her technique strangely resembled her mother's seen in photographs. After finishing, a small applause arose, and someone tossed the first coin into a hat placed in front of her. Amelia smiled and started playing Rachmaninoff's Prelude. As the sun rose, the station gradually buzzed with activity. Commuters began to stop and listen, her playing offering a brief respite in their hurried steps. "Is that girl always here?" "No, it's my first time seeing her." "About 13 years old, but that performance." Whispers were audible. Amelia ignored them and moved on to the next song. Every second counted for her father's medical expenses. After the morning rush, when the station quieted down, Amelia counted the money in her hat, about $20. It was far from enough for her father's treatment, but she knew this was just the beginning. At that moment, the sound of high heels approached. A woman dressed in a sophisticated dark blue suit stopped in front of Amelia. "Your performance was wonderful." The woman, probably in her 50s, smiling elegantly at Amelia. "I found your playing very intriguing." Amelia stood up nervously. "Thank you. Your rendition of Rachmaninoff was particularly impressive. To play such a difficult piece at your age." The woman paused, looking intently at Amelia. "Have you studied somewhere?" "No, I taught myself using my mother's scores and recordings." The woman's expression changed. "Your mother is." "She passed away when I was 5. The woman seemed about to say something but suddenly swayed. Amelia quickly supported her. "Are you all right?" "Yes, just a bit dizzy. I've been feeling unwell lately." Amelia helped her to a nearby bench, noticing her pallor. "Should I call an ambulance?" "No, it's okay." Just. Suddenly, a cell phone fell out of the woman's purse. Amelia couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the name displayed. Michael Sterling. Amelia's heart skipped a beat. Did this woman have a direct connection to Sterling? But now was not the time for such thoughts. The woman's breathing was becoming labored. "Excuse me." Amelia called to a nearby station attendant. "This lady is feeling ill." Within minutes, paramedics arrived. As they placed her on a stretcher, the woman grasped Amelia's hand. "Sophia Sterling." "That's my name," she said weakly. "And you are?" "Amelia." "Amelia Grace." As Amelia introduced herself, the woman fumbled in her handbag and pulled out a business card. Amelia, I owe you my thanks. Breathing laboriously, Sophia extended her business card to Amelia. Please, contact me. No need for thanks. Amelia hesitated to say. No, you must. Sophia insisted, placing the business card in Amelia's hand. Before being taken away in the ambulance. Later, Amelia went to school and returned to her apartment at dusk. Despite continuing her education, she had to refuse all piano lessons after school to care for her father. As she opened the door, she heard her father coughing more violently than usual. She rushed to his room and found Thomas shaking in pain, his face pale and his breathing shallow. Daddy! Amelia cried out, and the Johnsons, their neighbors who had always been like family, came running. My goodness! Mrs. Johnson exclaimed as she entered the room. George, get the car. Hold on, Thomas. Mr. Johnson said as he supported her father into the car. Amelia held her father's hand tightly, praying silently during the ride to the hospital. In the emergency room, Thomas was immediately taken for treatment. And Amelia sat in the waiting area, distraught. With only a few bills in her wallet, she worried about how to manage if he needed to be admitted. Touching a pocket, she felt the fine paper of the business card. That's right, the woman. Amelia took out her phone and dialed the number on the card. Hello? A gentle voice responded. It's Amelia Grace from this morning. Oh, you. Sophia's voice brightened over the phone. I wanted to thank you. You really saved me. I'm getting tests done at the hospital right now. When Sophia mentioned the hospital, Amelia gasped. I'm actually here now in the emergency room. My father suddenly fell ill. Oh my. That's terrible. Once your father's condition stabilizes, could you come visit me? I'm in a private room upstairs. There's something I want to discuss with you. Amelia ended the call and sat back down in the emergency waiting area. All she could do now was wait for the doctor. After a long wait, the doctor finally appeared. His condition has stabilized, but we can't send him home yet. We need to start the admission process. Amelia felt a tightness in her chest, overwhelmed by the thought of hospital expenses. For now, all she could do was hope for her father's recovery. Please let me observe him for a while, the doctor said, and Amelia nodded. After being informed that her father had been moved to another room, Amelia went to see him. Daddy. Thomas was asleep, looking tired but his complexion slowly improving. Amelia held his hand gently and sighed deeply. I wonder if I can go now. She remembered Sophia's invitation. With her father asleep, she could leave for a bit. After asking a nurse to keep an eye on her father, Amelia headed to the elevator. When Amelia knocked on Sophia's hospital room door, a voice said, Come in. By the window, Sophia sat on the bed, her demeanor much calmer than in the morning. Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. Thank you. Amelia said as she sat on a nearby stool. The door softly opened, and a woman in her 50s entered. Ah, Mary. Sophia smiled. Could you get something warm for this young lady? Of course. Mary turned to Amelia. Would you like some cocoa? Amelia nodded slightly, and Mary, who seemed to be Sophia's personal secretary, quietly left the room. Your performance this morning was wonderful. Where did you learn to play like that? From the scores and recordings my mother left behind. Ah, that's right, you said you were self-taught. Amelia nodded and Sophia smiled at her warmly. You have remarkable talent. Mary brought over some warm cocoa. Outside the window, dusk was deepening, and the light in the hospital room softly illuminated Sophia's elegant profile. I was a board member at a music school 13 years ago when I met my current husband. Do you know Michael Sterling? He was someone who discovered and nurtured young musicians. Perhaps his passion captured my heart too. Amelia's heartbeat quickened as she sat beside Sophia, who was lost in thought. She thought, so she was Michael's wife. But sometimes, he looks as if he's searching for someone. As if he's trying to find something he lost within the music. Amelia caught her breath. Her biological father, unaware of her existence, might still be chasing after her mother's memory. But she couldn't bring herself to say it out loud. Amelia, a talent like yours should be shared with more people. We are hosting a charity concert next month. Would you consider performing? Of course, you will be properly compensated. Amelia stared at the cocoa cup in her hands. A charity concert. It could be a chance to raise money for her father's treatment. But actually, Amelia hesitated before speaking. I've been worried about the cost of my father's hospital stay. She choked on her words. Was it okay to discuss this? But she needed to confide in someone. The doctors say he needs long-term treatment and hospitalization. But our savings are already depleted. Sophia's expression softened. That must have been hard for you. She slowly sat up in bed. There might be something I can do to help. I have connections on the hospital board. We might be able to get your father into a charitable care program that supports parts not covered by insurance. She added in a gentle voice. Also, the concert next month will also fundraise for this hospital's new treatment facility. Your performance could certainly touch many people. Sophia's warm smile and kindness tightened Amelia's chest. She needed to tell her about her mother, about Michael. But it felt like betraying this kind woman. Thank you, Amelia said, looking down. But inside, another thought was growing. She wanted Michael Sterling to hear her play. After all, it was a gift from her mother. Please let me think about the concert. I need to discuss it with my father. Of course, think it over positively. Amelia returned to her father's hospital room late at night. Thomas was breathing quietly in his sleep. The only sound was the drip of the four, marking the silence in the room. Sitting in a chair, Amelia reflected on Sophia's words. The charitable care program. The upcoming charity concert. Both could be lifelines for them. But first, Amelia took out a photo of her mother. Young Elizabeth smiling at a grand piano, with Michael next to her, his expression soft. First, she wanted him to hear her play. But how? Looking out the window at the dark night sky studded with stars. The address of Sterling Music from her mother's diary crossed her mind. Michael would surely be there. Amelia resolved to play there after school. Someone might listen. And maybe Michael would too. A week had passed. Amelia continued to play her small electronic piano in the plaza in front of Sterling Music after school. It was hard carrying it from school every day. But it was worth it for her father and to meet Michael. On the first day, a security guard almost chased her away. But once she started playing, their expressions changed. Now, they tolerated her. Office workers occasionally stopped to listen, although sometimes she encountered less sympathetic listeners. Excuse me, girl. Begging isn't really welcome around here. A woman dressed in an expensive suit looked down at Amelia with a cold gaze. Amelia responded quietly but firmly. I'm just playing music. Well, even your manner of speaking. The woman scoffed. Playing in front of this building, it's hardly begging, is it? Amelia turned back to her keyboard silently. Her heart ached. But she couldn't show tears. From her mother's scores, she chose a Chopin nocturne next. As her fingers moved, the earlier discomfort seemed to dissolve with the music. The woman started to say something but stopped as people around began to be drawn into the performance and hurriedly walked away. As Amelia played a piece loved by her mother, the windows of the high-rise glowed in the sunset. She hadn't met Michael yet. But surely, someday. Hey, miss, she turned to see an elderly man standing there, dressed in a quality suit, likely a worker from the building. Your playing is wonderful. But this isn't the place for it. You deserve a more suitable stage. The man's voice was kind, but Amelia shook her head. She couldn't explain why she had to keep playing here. Thank you, but... Small raindrops began to fall. Amelia hurried to move her borrowed electronic piano under the building's eaves. Then, the glass door opened, and several businessmen emerged. In the center was a figure that almost stopped Amelia's heart. Michael Sterling. Amelia quickly opened her bag and took out her mother's photo. The rain was getting heavier, but there was no time for hesitation. Mr. Sterling. Please wait. Her voice cut through the footsteps of the rushing businessmen. Please listen to my playing, just 3 minutes. At her earnest cry, Michael, dressed in an expensive suit, stopped. His entourage also showed surprised expressions for a moment. Amelia's chestnut hair was wet from the rain, and her school uniform clung to her body. But her amber eyes sparkled with a strong will. With trembling fingers, she held up the rain-soaked photo. Do you remember the woman in this photo? Michael stood frozen for a moment as the image of the woman in the photo overlaid with the girl in front of him. But he quickly regained his composure, gave some instructions to his secretary, and quickly disappeared into the building. Wait. As her voice was lost in the wind, Amelia remained standing, staring at the fading figure of the man. I will definitely make you listen. Amelia murmured with determination. My performance, and the truth I want to convey. When Amelia returned to the hospital, her father's condition was stable. A night nurse told her that Sophia had been looking for her. She wanted to see her even now. Knocking on the hospital room door, a gentle voice answered, Come in. Sophia was still awake, reading in bed. Sorry for coming so late. It's fine. Sophia closed her book and looked concernedly at Amelia's wet uniform. You seem to have been caught in the rain. Yes. Have you considered the charity concert? Sophia asked gently. Your performance is wonderful, and I would really like as many people as possible to hear it. Amelia nodded silently. She hadn't yet spoken to her father, but her inner voice wanting to participate in the concert urged her on. Yet, Sophia's kindness was tightening her chest. She wanted to talk about her mother, Michael, and the events of today. But how could she put it into words without startling or hurting this kind woman? Such fears made the 13-year-old hesitate. That night, Amelia sat pondering by the window in her father's hospital room. She couldn't get Michael's reaction today out of her mind, the way he froze when he saw the photo. He must have remembered her mother. But why? She took out her mother's diary, which held the truth from 14 years ago. Showing it to Sophia would clarify everything. But Sophia is truly kind, Amelia murmured to herself. That's why she couldn't easily speak. First, she wanted Michael to hear her play. Maybe something would change. With the sound of the piano she inherited from her mother. Until then. Outside the window, stars twinkled in the post-rain night sky. It was Saturday morning. Amelia was preparing to visit her father. As she packed a change of clothes for the hospital, the thought of the expensive treatment constricted her heart. And as she was about to leave the apartment, she ran into Mr. Green, the landlord. The usually gentle elderly man looked stern today. Amelia, good timing. Good morning, Mr. Green. There's something I need to talk about. Mr. Green paused and sighed deeply. The building has changed owners. The new owner is very strict about rent arrears. Amelia's heart began to race. They want you out by the end of this week. Mr. Green continued with difficulty. I'm sorry. I tried to get an extension. The morning sunlight flickered in the corridor as Amelia envisioned the things. In her father's hospital room, her mother's keepsakes, and that piano. By the end of this week. I'm really sorry, especially with your father hospitalized. Amelia struggled to hold back tears. Mr. Green had been the landlord since Elizabeth was well. That evening, Amelia visited Sophia's hospital room with heavy steps. She had to consult someone, and Sophia was the first person who came to mind. Sophia, may I have a moment? What's wrong, Amelia? I have something I need to tell you. As Amelia spoke quietly, the room door was knocked. Come in. Sophia called, and the door opened. How are you feeling? Michael Sterling stood there. Amelia instinctively stepped back, still vividly remembering yesterday's rainy encounter. Oh, Amelia! Sophia exclaimed. Perfect timing, I wanted to introduce you. This is my husband Michael, the music producer I mentioned before. He's heard about your fantastic performance at Grand Central Station. At that moment, Amelia, confused, dropped her mother's diary and photograph she was holding. Michael quickly moved to pick it up, but the photo slid to the floor. This picture. Michael's voice trembled. Michael? Sophia looked at her husband worriedly. Elizabeth. At that name, the room felt as if it had frozen over. Amelia spoke up with a trembling voice. I was the one playing outside the building in the rain the other day. This picture, this woman is my mother, and I am her daughter. Michael sat down heavily, still holding the picture. Elizabeth, she had a child? His voice was hoarse. When? 14 years ago. Amelia clutched her mother's diary to her chest. My mother wrote here that she didn't want to damage a producer's reputation. Michael's face drained of color. 14 years ago. He stared intensely at Amelia. Her golden brown hair, her gray eyes. Even her mannerisms were so reminiscent of Elizabeth. No way. Amelia nodded gently. Watching Michael tear up, Sophia gasped, slowly grasping the reality unfolding before her. She had a child. I have a daughter. Michael murmured, then turned to Sophia, taking her hand gently. Sophia, the 13 years I've spent with you have been the most precious of my life. But before that, I made a great mistake. If only I had realized Elizabeth's feelings back then. Amelia wouldn't have to go through this. Sophia squeezed his hand back. It's okay, Michael. Let's start fixing what we can. Michael nodded slowly and turned to Amelia. Amelia, is there anything we can do for you? Tears welled up in Amelia's eyes, relieved to have finally shared her secret, and touched by the kindness of the couple before her. Actually, Amelia said, looking down guiltily, we have to leave our home. My father is still in the hospital, but this morning, the landlord told us we have to leave by the end of the week. Her voice choked up. This week? Michael frowned. It seems the ownership of the apartment is changing, and we've fallen behind on rent. That's why you came to me today. Sophia realized gently after hearing Amelia's clumsy explanation. Sophia, you've been so kind about my father's medical bills, and yet, I've kept this important thing hidden. You hid it? Don't worry. To carry such a big truth at 13. Sophia smiled. Hey Amelia, we're family, aren't we? Tears streamed down Amelia's cheeks as Michael and Sophia looked at each other and nodded silently. Amelia. Michael stood up, ready to act. Let's take immediate action. First, I'll contact my lawyer to start negotiations with the new owner. But before that, would you like to use our vacation home? It's a bit away from Manhattan, but it has a grand piano. You could use it to practice for the charity concert. A vacation home? Amelia responded, her voice filled with surprise. Yes. Let's consult with your father too. If he recovers well and is discharged, he could also rest there. As for the medical expenses, let Sophia arrange the charity medical program. And let me fulfill my responsibilities as your father. Overwhelmed by their unexpected offers, Amelia was at a loss for words. Just hours ago, her future was clouded with great uncertainty. But now it seemed to be enveloped in an entirely different light. Thank you, Amelia said in a faint voice, expressing her gratitude. Amelia, I owe you an apology. Michael continued, his gaze fixed on her. I ran away that day without realizing your true intentions. I am truly sorry. Amelia shook her head slightly. It's okay. I was impulsive too. My mother's diary said, Michael sees souls in music. So I thought, if you could hear my performance, you might understand about my mother, about me. Then, make sure to let me fully hear your performance at the charity concert. I want that too. Sophia leaned in, her expression illuminated with a light different from before. As if discovering a new familial bond. And feeling relief that a long-standing emptiness in Michael's heart was being filled. I want to listen to your music with all my heart. Yes. Amelia responded quietly, yet firmly. I will play with all my heart at the charity concert. Outside the window, the rain had stopped. And the sunset light was streaming into the hospital room. I'll go to my father's room now. Amelia stood up. Go ahead. Sophia nodded. But considering your father's condition, take it slow with today's news. Amelia left the room and headed towards her father's. Thomas was at the window bed, watching the sunset. Daddy. Amelia entered quietly. The setting sun gently illuminated Thomas's tired face. Thomas turned slowly to his daughter and smiled. Amelia. Amelia sat down beside the bed and took her father's hand. Daddy, there's something I need to tell you. What is it? Thomas's voice carried his usual warmth, but there was a hint of worry. Amelia took a deep breath. This morning, Mr. Green told us. The building's owner has changed. And we need to leave our home this week. What? Thomas's expression clouded over. This week? That's sudden. But don't worry. Amelia quickly added. I found Mom's diary. It has Amelia explained quietly yet clearly about the diary, Michael Sterling, and her own birth secret. Thomas was silent for a moment, but then smiled gently. So, you finally know. His voice was calm. Elizabeth said there would come a time to tell. Did you know, Daddy? Yes. When Elizabeth confided everything to me, I decided to love you as my precious daughter. Thomas gently squeezed Amelia's hand. That hasn't changed and won't change. Tears filled Amelia's eyes. Thank you, Daddy. And, actually, Mrs. Sterling introduced someone from the hospital board. They have a program that will help with medical bills. Thomas looked surprised. That's not all. Amelia continued. They're letting us use their vacation home for the time being. Once you're discharged, you can rest there. Amelia paused momentarily and continued, her voice tinged with a hint of nervousness. And there's a charity concert next month. I've been given a chance to perform to raise funds for a new medical facility at the hospital. A charity concert? A faint joy appeared on Thomas's tired face. Yes. Mrs. Sterling recommended me. Amelia smiled shyly. She heard my performance somewhere and approached me. That's wonderful. Thomas's eyes moistened. Your piano opening paths like this. Your mother would surely be happy. Daddy. The joy of reaching people's hearts is the greatest pleasure for us musicians. Thomas's voice was weak but filled with undeniable pride. After a moment, he sighed deeply. I need to properly greet Mr. Sterling too. Daddy, there's a lot I need to tell him, about Elizabeth and about you. That's true. But first, your health is the most important. We can think about other things later. Amelia spoke firmly. Focus on your treatment first. Thomas nodded quietly. You've really grown strong. Because you taught me. Amelia smiled softly and leaned in close to her father. No matter how tough it is, never give up and always look forward. As the sunset bathed the hospital room in a crimson glow, the two shared a quiet moment together. Despite the sudden changes, the next morning, Sunday, Amelia was packing her belongings minimally. Her mother's photo, the diary, and her precious sheet music. As the movers took out the piano, she quietly surveyed the room she had lived in for 13 years. Amelia, are you ready? The driver arranged by Sophia politely called out. The car headed to the suburbs, and soon they arrived at a villa surrounded by trees. A black Steinway piano sat in the spacious living room, as if it had been waiting for her. Hesitantly, Amelia touched the keys, and the warm tones filled the room. It was different from her mother's piano, but strangely familiar. Starting tomorrow, after school, I'll arrange for the car to come here. Sophia explained, having just been discharged from the hospital the day before. Amelia looked out the window at the quiet environment. Far from the hustle of Manhattan, where a new chapter was about to begin. Also, about the arrangements, the car will come at 7 a.m. You'll have plenty of time to get to school. After school, you should first stop by the hospital to check on your father, then come back here. I can see Daddy every day? Amelia's expression brightened. Yes. On weekdays, I'll have the car wait at the hospital until 8 p.m. You need to cherish both the time with your father and your practice. And don't worry about meals. The fridge will always be restocked. And I'll make sure something is prepared if you're late. Sophia's meticulous care made Amelia express her gratitude. Thank you. I'll practice hard for the concert. Sounds of her mother's piano being moved into another room echoed, while the unfamiliar environment brought anxiety. The safeguarding of time with her father and the provision of practice opportunities lightened her heart. On Monday morning, Amelia began her new life. Precisely at 7 a.m., the car arrived to take her to school. Eating breakfast in the car, she watched the scenery flow by outside the window. After school, as promised, the driver took her to the hospital. Thomas looked healthier than she had imagined. "Daddy, I've moved into the new house. It's very quiet, and the grand piano sounds great." Thomas smiled, listening to his daughter's story. "So, you start practicing today?" "Yes. I'll do my best until the charity concert." The car left the hospital in the evening twilight, heading back to the villa. The Steinway in the living room awaited her quietly. Amelia took a deep breath and sat at the piano. The first notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto filled the room. Her mother's favorite music now resonated with new life in the space. As the sun began to set and the room lights came on automatically, Amelia's fingers knew no rest. She would dedicate this month to practice for her father and to let her real father hear her music. A month later, on the day of the charity concert, with the doctor's permission, Thomas was brought to the venue in a wheelchair. The new hospital hall was packed, and in the front row sat wheelchair-bound Thomas, with Sophia and Michael beside him. When Amelia appeared on stage, the hall fell silent. She took a deep breath, smiled gently at the three in the front row, and started playing the first notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto. The music, inherited from her mother, resonated note by note, filled with soul. Tears of pride welled up in Thomas's eyes, and Michael, too, was deeply immersed in the performance, seeing the image of Elizabeth in his daughter. After the performance, a huge applause erupted. Amelia ran to the front row and hugged Thomas. "Thank you for listening, Daddy. That was wonderful." Thomas hugged his daughter gently and then looked towards Michael. "She's your daughter." Michael expressed his gratitude. "No, Thomas. Amelia is our daughter to all of us. Thank you for these 13 years." Sophia gently placed her hands on the shoulders of the two men. "Let's support Amelia's new life together." As Thomas's treatment progressed smoothly, he was soon able to recuperate at the villa. The spacious garden, planted with Elizabeth's favorite roses, provided a peaceful retreat, where Amelia enjoyed taking care of the flowers between practice sessions. "Mom, can you see this?" In the evening twilight, Amelia looked up at the blossoming roses and murmured, "I'm receiving so much love from many people. Now, I want to give back through my music." Her piano notes filled the evening air, the sound of hope overcoming sorrow and finding new happiness. By the following spring, the villa's garden boasted blooming white magnolias. Thomas, now able to play the violin again thanks to innovative treatment, sat on a garden bench, playing. From the living room, Amelia's piano music flowed. Michael had arranged for top-notch personal lessons to enhance her talent, and her performance deepened day by day. "Daddy, would you like to play this piece with me?" Amelia stepped into the garden, calling out to Thomas. He moved to the living room, violin in hand, and together they began an impromptu performance of Gershwin's "Summertime," the song that first brought Elizabeth and Thomas together. As Michael and Sophia listened to the father-daughter duet from the sofa, they smiled warmly, holding hands. The harmony woven by the two was as if Elizabeth herself was present, a mystical beauty in their sound. "Elizabeth, can you hear this?" Michael whispered inwardly. We have all become one family through Amelia. As the evening light streamed in, the music continued. Those who had once walked separate paths were now united in one melody. A warm tune woven by the new family bonds, filling the room.